I know firsthand how much stress can mess with your hormones. Between work, life, and everything else, it's easy to feel completely out of balance. That's where Happy Mammoth comes in. They offer a free 2-minute quiz that can help you uncover the root cause of your hormonal symptoms. It's super easy. Just answer a few questions about what you're going through and where you're at in life. You'll get a personalized recommendation to help balance your hormones and start feeling better. When I took the quiz, it suggested that my body may be overloaded with hormone estrogen and may be struggling to metabolize it. By taking Hormone Harmony, it could help with bloating, anxiety, fatigue, overwhelm, and so much more. With over 40,000 5-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. So if you're ready to start feeling like yourself again, head over to happymammoth.com and take their free 2-minute hormone quiz today to find the ultimate answers to your stubborn hormonal issues. And for a limited time, you could also get 15% off your entire first order with our code DATEABLE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DATEABLE for 15% off today.
Are you too busy to pick out the perfect outfit every day? I get it. It's tough to juggle work, life, and still find the time to focus on fashion. That's where Armoire comes in. With a clothing rental membership, you can effortlessly turn heads with stylish, everyday looks tailored just for you. With all of our book events and photo ops recently, I rented all my outfits from Armoire. It's been so fun and so great to not have to buy a whole new wardrobe, but also be on trend and even experiment with some different styles. All I did was take a quick 5-minute style quiz, build a personalized closet, and wait for high-quality, unique pieces delivered to my door in as little as 2 days. Oh, and did I mention that Armoire is women-founded and women-led? Right now, our listeners can give Armoire a try and get up to 50% off their first month. That's up to $125 off. Just visit armoire.style/dateable. That's Armoire, spelled ARMOIRE.style/DATEABLE to get up to 50% off your first month and never worry about what to wear again. Try Armoire today. Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Krafchick.
We're active daters turned dating insiders.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to Dateable. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to another great episode of Dateable.
Great episode. Fantastic.
Great episode.
The best episode yet. And tomorrow I get to see Julie in person again for another book event in San Francisco. And this time we're going to the Battery. Like, you can't say the Battery without raising a pinky. It's a bougie place, members only social club, like a Soho House, but in San Francisco. And we're really looking forward to it.
It's going to be a great event. I think this has been like one of the ones that we've booked that we're just like, oh my God, this is kind of, a dream because it's such a cool space and we've gone to events there. I mean, I've definitely gone to a lot of talks there, but also I went to Chainsmokers concert there. The key is you have to know a member. You can't just like roll in, but we were able to get some guest passes for our people. So yeah, this was all happening, if you're listening real time, last week. So hopefully if you were one of those lucky people, you enjoyed it.
And if you really missed out, because we were able to give away quite a few tickets to our listeners to this event, it probably means you haven't been on our social media. So this is a good reminder to be on at Dateable Podcast on Instagram, because that's where we announce everything. And these things go by so fast. So you got to be on it.
And then the Facebook group, of course, Big Dateable Energy. There's so many ways to be in touch with us, but we're excited. We have more events. We have big one at Santa Monica Public Library coming up in May. We have a literary festival that we're attending in May also. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff in our pipeline. You can also follow along at dateablepodcast.com/events is another way to stay up to date. Or you can always DM us.
We also had a second event in San Francisco at the ground floor. So yes, there's so many events coming up, and we hope to add more to our calendar, especially in a city near you. If you're interested, you can email us. Tell us where your favorite spots in your hometown, and then we'll try to make something happen.
Yeah. But for now, on this episode, we're going to get vulnerable, guys. It's going to be a vulnerable episode, and I'm here for it.
So who do we have? Dr. Morgan Anderson. She is talking about healing from relational trauma to finally becoming securely attached and attracting her emotionally available dream partner. And she helps other women release their traumas so they can do the same.
Yes, and she's a clinical psychologist and attachment theory expert. So we are definitely getting into attachment theory. We know you all love digging into this more, but I do find her story so inspiring because she really shows that like you can have patterns that aren't serving you and find a way out.
Yeah, and she talks about the toxic relationship that she was in. What I really took away from this conversation is you can't control what happens to you, but you can control what you take out of these situations. And she's created an entire career out of this practice and out of this previous trauma that she went through. And it's very noble of her to do so. And also just another way to look at everything we go through in life. The challenges we can't control, but it's how we bounce back from them.
Yeah. I mean, I do think she has an incredibly powerful story. There is a little bit of a trigger warning around like domestic abuse. So just want to put that out there at the top. But this episode is really focused on vulnerability and healing from the chapters in your life that maybe had more toxicity from others and even maybe self-inflicted toxicity around, your attachment wounds and how that really shapes your overall life.
And speaking of attachment wounds, we are so aligned with Dr. Morgan for talking about attachment styles in a way that frees you, not in a way that restricts you. We're no longer prisoner to just this one attachment style and this is who we are. She actually helps you release you from your attachment wounds.
I know. I have such a mixed relationship on attachment theory, as you know. I mean, I just think of like two of my friends talking about how like they stayed up all night at this party talking about how they were like fearful avoidance and how are they just like totally fucked with love. And I'm like, okay, it's nice that the awareness is there. It's very important to like understand our past and how that's shaping how we show up in day to day. But what I don't like is it makes it feel like there's something wrong with you. And I also feel like it's not always so binary. Like I think there's certain areas where I feel like I've been secure, other areas where I've been anxious, and other areas where I've had some avoidant tendencies. And of course, there's still like overarching, I definitely had more of an anxious style that I still comes in once in a while that I've done work on to make more secure. So again, I'm not against attachment theory. I do think that net, it's a positive, but I do think sometimes the nuances are missing.
And I think that's what she really talks about here too. And I think we do get stuck on this umbrella definition of what each one is. And I hate that we qualify them. Some are good, some are bad, some are aspirational, some you don't want to be. But being with the right partner, I truly believe that partner celebrates you regardless of what attachment style you are. It's not about coping with you or dealing with you, or it's not about avoiding it, but to really lean in and help you through it, right? And who's like leaning in, who's like, yeah, you're anxiously attached. I get that. Let's work through it.
Yeah, I think that was like one of the game-changing moments for me is that I did all this work and then I'm like, okay, I still feel that anxiety if I don't get the text back. That's like the one area it shows up in. I'm like, if I'm dating someone, they want to go out with their friends all night, I have no anxiety around that. Go for it. Have fun. Have a blast. But if I don't see the text come in, I start to get in my head. So I realized that like even with the work, that was still lingering. And I think the one thing I did differently in my relationship when I first started dating my fiance was that I shared this with him. I came out and was like, hey, this is my one thing. And that was vulnerable to like put yourself out there to be judged and to do that. But I think it actually really helped because he's like, I want to make you happy. Like knowing this helps me show up better and make you happy. And I said this too, like when it wasn't like he did, like it wasn't like he ignored me for 8 hours and then I said it. I kind of got ahead ahead of it. Cause then I was like, okay, I'm giving him a roadmap of how to do it. And then also like he can be aware that this is something. So like if he has that moment where he's like, I'm busy versus I'm busy, but let me just like send a text and say like, let me text you in an hour. I can make that call because I now know.
So this is actually good homework for you all. When you think about your dating profiles, we see this a lot. You know, some of you put that you're anxiously attached or you like put it out there as an identifier along with your personality test and all that. But I think as a person on the receiving end who's trying to date you, I want to know what that means exactly. What does that mean for me? What does that mean in relation to our dynamic? And in the example Julie just said, and in your own examples, think about that. Yes, you can put that out there, but on your date, really discuss like being anxiously attached to me means text messaging is very important. Going out with your friends, actually, I don't get anxious there. I think that's actually a really fascinating date conversation. So you're not just talking about, well, this is who I am. You got to deal with it.
Right. I think one of our, favorite posts on Instagram, it was, they're not avoidant, they're just an asshole. And I think there's a lot in there because I just remember like this conversation in one of our communities. I can't fully remember. Maybe it was the Facebook group where someone was going on about how the guy she was dating was really avoidant and, like wouldn't respond to her for days and wouldn't address, like if they had an issue, would just stonewall her and not talk to her. And people in the group were like, well, like this doesn't seem like a good situation, blah, blah. And I just remember, I think I might have even commented like, okay, it's important to know that they're avoidant, but that doesn't like excuse the behavior. Because I think there was a lot, the way it was written was like, should I leave? Should I be with him? Because I know he's still working through these avoidant, tendencies. And that's great. Don't want to say it's not good that he's working through it, but it shouldn't like impact how someone treats you. Like I think there's like two things there.
Yeah. And also, someone's past trauma only explains who they are. It's not an excuse for who they are. And it's the same thing with everything in our dating dynamic. Let's not excuse people's behavior because now we know more information about them. I think we can get more curious. But an asshole is still an asshole. Bad behavior is still bad behavior. Let's not overlook any of that.
Well, I feel like you have shown so much growth here. I'm going to give you a gold star here. But like I know...
A trophy? No, like you'll never give me. No, you get the trophies. I get the gold stars.
I can't give you the trophy.
All the trophies go to Julie, but I'll get all the gold stars.
People are like, what? You got to listen back a couple episodes in one of our brunch
Julie
talks.
has a trophy fetish.
I explain it. I explain it. Okay, it sounds worse than it is.
She has a trophy fetish. We'll just leave it there.
Let's not call it that. Anyways. But I think you are someone that I feel like you self-share this. I'm not saying anything new, but like you were like, I feel like, I want to avoid. Like I want to run away from conflict. I don't want to face it because it's easier to just avoid it. But over the years, you've taken steps to be like, okay, even if it's uncomfortable, I'm going to confront it, like head on and run towards it. And I think like you have said things like even in your current partnership of like, I might not necessarily understand because I don't process it this way, but the truth of the other person is the truth of the other person. And I'm going to listen and adapt because I don't want to like hurt or do something that affects them. And I think that is so different than like this example of the person that was avoidant, but just like wouldn't have conversations, wouldn't, work through it with the person.
Yeah. And unfortunately, our younger generations, the trend is going towards this avoidant style because the younger generation doesn't want to take risks anymore. The younger generation's really scared of rejection, so they don't put themselves out there anymore. There's so much avoidance going on. And in my own personal journey, I can wholeheartedly say that when I have these tough conversations, it's not about having that conversation. It's about what can this scenario show me? What is the scenario trying to teach me? And it's always going to be on the positive. You have nothing to lose there. But until we put ourselves out there, we don't get the answers. We don't get the authenticity of other people. And I really hope that people can take more risks.
I think that's a really good point too, because we do hear this and there's stats like like about how, Gen Z doesn't want to take as many risks and put themselves out there. But it's funny to me because I feel like vulnerability is such the buzzword, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that is like the definition of vulnerability, is putting yourself out there when you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. But it also shows how like the word vulnerability is kind of like this ambiguous cloud. I feel like no one fully like can define vulnerability. So I'm glad that we go into that in this episode. We also talk about that at length in our book, in the Showing Up chapter, which actually we were on Dr. Morgan's podcast, Let's Get Vulnerable, to talk about our book. And she really loved that section. Of course, makes sense. She loves getting vulnerable. But we really focused in on the Showing Up chapter because we had examples of, dates we had been on, masked by stories. And then also like, that's the Easter egg, is some of the stories in there are actually ours, but we just covered them up. But we also have heard a lot from people too in the 10 years we've been doing Dateable. And like, I always think of, that date you went on where the guy just like told you about like his girlfriend having a recent abortion, or we had
his
like
ex-girlfriend. Yes.
Ex-girlfriend. Sorry. Let's clarify.
That would have been really awkward.
That would have been very awkward. But he like went into like all his feelings around it. You hadn't even had like a drink with the guy.
Yeah.
And then I remember like when we did Exit Interview, like talking to one of the people on there about how he like did like a Instagram live about like STIs.
Right.
And like, because he's like, but I'm vulnerable. I did that. We're like, I think the word just gets so misconstrued.
Yeah, there's the act and then there's the tension.
Yeah.
So the act of vulnerability is performative and sometimes contrived because you're just being vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable. But if you're intending to be vulnerable, that's very different. I'm intending to show you a side of me that I don't normally show people, or a side of me that I consider something I'm working on, or something that could be seen as weak. That's intended vulnerability. Very different.
I also think just like taking risks is vulnerable, like asking someone on that date, facing rejection head on, like all the stuff that we, are so afraid to do. A lot of that, like, I think sometimes we almost like look for that like deeper vulnerability where just the act of doing is vulnerable.
Yeah, we definitely have people said, well, I haven't been through much trauma in my life.
Yeah, you don't have to.
How do I be vulnerable? Well, one, good for you. Very lucky. But we can all be vulnerable. Like, I'm vulnerable when I just tell someone this is how I feel. Like, I'm feeling a little nervous right now, or I'm feeling a little bit triggered right now. Like, that's vulnerability. And it doesn't have to be capital letter T, trauma.
No, definitely doesn't need to be trauma dumping. But we go into all of it on this episode. It is such a good one. So make sure to, go through the whole episode. And then, of course, subscribe so you get future ones.
And if you want to get vulnerable with us, leave us a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Be vulnerable about what you're feeling about you, us, the show, anything. But make sure it's 5 stars because that's where true vulnerability comes from.
Or just give us that appreciation because we are vulnerable to show up every day and do this.
We're vulnerable in asking you for a rating and review.
A lot of vulnerability here. And while we're on the rating and reviews, we've been loving seeing the reviews that are coming in for the book, How to Be Dateable. So if you have Goodreads, if you have, I guess wherever you bought the book, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, whatever, if you could drop us a review there as well. First of all, we love seeing it, but also it really helps. It really helps build the momentum of this book. And of course, if you haven't gotten it yet, howtobedateable.com.
Yay.
Okay, well, before we get into it with Dr. Morgan, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
For so long, I viewed bras and shapewear as torture devices. Like, who invented them? But I've since changed my mind because I tried Skims. The Fits Everybody collection from Skims is like nothing I've ever tried before. Everything just molds to my body. Almost feels like I'm not wearing anything at all. Now, I've heard all about Skims for so long, and let me tell you, they sure live up to the hype. I've really enjoyed wearing the cheeky bikini underwear. It's like my go-to underwear because honestly, I just can't do thongs anymore. But this is the perfect combination of a no-show and comfy. And I also found the perfect color to match my skin. So the undies don't show through white pants. Yeah, finally. Shop Skims Ultimate Bra Collection and more at skims.com and Skims LA flagship on Sunset Boulevard. After you place your order, be sure to let them know we sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select our show, Dateable, in the drop-down menu that follows. Vacation season is nearly upon us, and this year I'm treating myself to the luxe upgrades I deserve with Quince's high-quality travel essentials at fair prices, like lightweight European linen styles from $30, with premium luggage options and stylish tote bags to carry it all. And what's music to my ears is that all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. I love that. Now, for me, I've upgraded my travel outfit with the Quince Ultra Stretch Straight Leg Ponte Pants. They look like put together slacks, but feel like lounge pants. So perfect for long flights. For your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quince. Go to quince.com/dateable for 365-day returns, plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/DATEABLE.
Okay, let's hear it from Dr. Morgan.
Let's get vulnerable with Dr. Morgan. Nice to have you on Dateable. Welcome.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you because we've been Instagram friends for a while and we had the pleasure of being on your podcast and just love your story and just everything you talk about of embracing, a securely attached mindset. And of course, that requires getting vulnerable.
I've never looked up the meaning of the word vulnerable. I just kind of assumed I knew what it meant. But it comes from the Latin word meaning to wound. That's so fascinating. So in your opinion, what does it mean to be vulnerable?
Yeah. To me personally, it means being willing to be in touch with our true selves about who are we really and what do we really need. And then being willing to show that to the world and show that to the people in our lives. And I like to think of it as intentional in terms of we're letting people earn our vulnerability over time. So it's this awareness of I'm deeply connected to myself. And because of that connection to myself, I know how I can intentionally share myself with other people in the world.
I love that. I guess from your perspective, how do you think daters are getting being vulnerable right? And then maybe some ways that they're getting it wrong when dating? Because I think people are like, we need to be vulnerable. Let's do it. And then people just don't really know what that means and looks like when dating.
One of the things I would say is we're getting it wrong if we haven't learned how to be vulnerable with ourselves first. So realizing what are the things that you need to work through? Where are you at? What do you really want? If we don't have that vulnerability with ourselves first and really knowing who we are, then dating can feel so challenging. Another way that I think people are getting it wrong is this idea that, I should just bare my soul on the first date.
Trauma dump. Yeah.
Right? The trauma dump. And sometimes that happens with insecure attachment styles unconsciously. It's this pull of, let me tell them everything about me. So that if they're gonna leave me, they'll do it right away.
Yep.
So it can be this unconscious pull, but that is absolutely not how we want to use vulnerability in our dating lives. Like I said, we want to be intentional, let people earn our vulnerability over time, let the relationship become secure so that being vulnerable just feels natural and it feels like I'm deepening my connection with you.
Are there any ways that people are getting it right?
Well, I think there is the zeitgeist in dating right now of, hey, let's talk about our mental health. Let's talk about what dating has been like for us. Let's talk about what we want. You all talk about this in your book, right? Like the revolution of how can we show up differently. So there are a lot of people that I think are being more open and honest about what they want. And they're not playing the dating games that we have seen for so long. So I think that's a great example of it being done right.
When you say be vulnerable with yourself, what does that look like? Is that a conversation?
This is an ongoing relationship. So many of us who've experienced relational trauma, we lost the connection to our inner selves. And a lot of us haven't regained that connection because we've been so conditioned to be externally focused and people pleasing. How do I be a chameleon in my relationship so that people don't leave me, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to intentionally reconnect to your inner knowing and to your needs. I know that sounds like a little woo-woo, but a lot of us, we need to date ourselves, build that relationship with ourselves to get really crystal clear on who we are and what we want. Because for so long, in order to survive in relationships, that was totally disconnected.
I know for me that gaining clarity and, getting in touch with my needs was game changing because it completely changed the way I dated. I know you also have a similar story about just your journey to getting more secure. Can you kind of share with us your journey and like what shifts happened along the way?
Yeah. I think about that movie, Runaway Bride. Have you all seen that?
Yes. Yep.
Remember when she doesn't know how she likes her eggs? That's like one example. I think about in my past, in like toxic dating patterns that I had in the past, I was that chameleon person of just who do I have to become in any relationship so that I'm not abandoned. For me, experiencing childhood trauma, I lost my mom at a very young age. I was 6 years old. And then from there was a lot of chaos in my family of my dad going on to marry and divorce. And I would just say, to sum up my childhood, I would say one word, and it's chaos. There was a lot of moving, unpredictability. From a very young age, I just learned to be focused on what other people wanted and needed and be kind of that caregiver. And it really made me susceptible to unhealthy relationships. I wasn't connected to myself. I developed a disorganized attachment style, so both anxious and avoidant tendencies. And for me, what happened is I was in these toxic patterns until probably my mid-20s. They kind of reached the worst level that they could, and that I attracted a full-blown narcissist in my mid-20s.
When you say full-blown narcissist, because that word gets tossed around a lot.
Yeah.
Could you kind of share a little more of like what that was like for you and the relationship, if you're willing?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And it does get tossed around a lot. And it's actually one of my pet peeves is people labeling people as narcissists when maybe they just have avoidant attachment style. So that's a whole other tangent.
Well, it diminishes probably like your experience or like people that actually have
Right.
dealt
Yeah,
with
like actual
people.
narcissists.
Of course. And there's always people where they have traits of it. Maybe they don't meet full criteria. Lucky for me, I was studying clinical psychology and had the DSM-5 available. So I can tell you all the classic things happened with the love bombing in the beginning. I was getting flown around. Here I am, this broke grad student getting flown around the country in first class and having these fancy dinners. All these amazing gifts were given to me, spending so much time with him and his family. For the first 6 months, I thought, this is a fairy tale. I have found my Prince Charming. I am marrying this man. To me, it felt like the greatest drug I had ever had in my life. I had been craving being chosen at that level for so long that to experience it was just pure ecstasy for the first 6 months. And then just like classic narcissist form, it started really slow. He began to devalue me and emotionally abuse me, essentially. So I remember the very first thing was he said, I hate when you wear your hair in a ponytail.
Wow.
It makes you look so ugly.
Oh my
And
God.
that's like a tiny thing, but I remember like 6 months in, that was like the first thing.
Right.
I hate. Wow, that's
That's a strong word. Yeah.
And it caught me off guard, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this person. So you think, oh, that's odd. And then slowly over time, think things got worse and worse. And he completely eroded my self-esteem. I was at the lowest point of my life, just feeling completely worthless. And he had also isolated me from friends and family. So at the time I was living with my best friend, and he had caused so much drama in that relationship that my friend moved out of our apartment.
Shit.
He didn't like when I spoke to my family. He was controlling what I wore every day, where I went. He knew where I was at all times. I was completely isolated and controlled, and I had very low self-esteem. Of course, there was emotional abuse and some physical abuse towards the end. And then I did have a near-death experience that really was the thing that made me reevaluate. I was filling out a police report, as you do when something like this happens. And I remember I was in the lobby of my apartment building where I lived at the time, and I couldn't stand. I was in so much emotional pain. I was sitting in the lobby, just sobbing, and all these people walking by, my neighbors, people that knew me, and they were watching me talk to this police officer. And it was that moment I just went, this cannot be my life. I cannot live like this. I had one of those out of body experiences where you're looking down on yourself. And I said, this has to change. And it was in that moment that I decided I'm going to research how to have a healthy relationship. I'm going to figure it out. And even if it's not possible for me, because I didn't believe it was, I thought at least I could understand it. And I would love to be able to understand it. So that's when I threw myself into researching attachment theory and rewiring your brain for a healthy relationship and how to fully release relational trauma. And this did not happen overnight, but over the course of 5 to 7 years, I was able to become securely attached and be the person that you see today in a healthy relationship for 3 years, getting married in 2025. And I'm so grateful that I made that decision to heal.
Wow.
Out of so much pain. Yeah.
What a powerful story.
Yeah.
I mean, the near-death experience, was that related to the person you were in a relationship, or was it something external that caused you to be like, what's my life?
It was at the hands of my partner of the time,
Okay,
the
shit.
narcissist. Yeah.
Okay.
And there was a witness that stopped anything from happening. I always like to say trigger warning in case people don't want to listen to this, but essentially he had thrown me into a vehicle and was threatening to drive us off of a bridge in Portland, and was, yelling all of this in this parking lot. And there was someone who witnessed it and got the license plate and called the police.
Damn. So he went from emotionally abusive to physically abusive.
Yes. And then there were death threats and I'm going to blow up your place of work. And I mean, I dealt with that for years after the relationship ended. I think people don't realize that when you're leaving that kind of partner, it's years.
It's not over.
Yeah, it's not over. It gets worse, actually, unfortunately.
Right.
But very fortunate to have a good support system. I was becoming a clinical psychologist at the time. I had incredible therapists that I was able to meet with and mentors, and I was able to get out of it.
I feel like I've seen like you share about your story, but I'm not sure if I knew the full extent of it. And it just shows like how much work you've done.
Yeah.
And sorry that you had to go through something like this, but the fact that you were able to rise above it and come out of it, that's so like commendable.
Thank you. I am so grateful that I was able to get out of it. And I have so much compassion for anyone who's stuck in that kind of dynamic, because I know how hard it is to get out. And I will say that process of healing from all of that, it took a long time. So I just think anybody listening who's been through this, just give yourself time. You will get to a place where it's not as painful. And I'm just so grateful to be with someone now who has been such a corrective emotional experience is how I think of it. He's just incredible. He's the most emotionally intelligent, attuned, securely attached partner. And it's been so incredibly healing to be in that kind of relationship.
When you talked about the previous relationship and how you felt that you wanted to be picked at that level and you were desiring that for so long, how were you able to get yourself out of the pick me mentality after this relationship blew up? I don't know how you were able to course correct in such a vulnerable and healthy way.
I think when you've experienced childhood trauma, for me, it was a lot of neglect and abandonment. You are susceptible to that. Oh, I just want someone to choose me. I just want to feel like I have that attention, right? So for me, really healing it involved going back to my childhood and really working through that root trauma and realizing that I could no longer take my childhood unfinished business into my adult dating life. That's what so many of us need to realize, is that we have to get to the source, to the root of what's happening in our patterns and deal with it directly so that we can choose our partners as healthy, emotionally available adults instead of trying to fix the things from our childhood in our dating lives.
Were there any like techniques or tactics that you either used for yourself or you use with clients today? Because I think we hear this a lot of, you have to address your childhood, but sometimes it feels more abstract. And I'd love to know if there's like something that you did that was like, this helped give like so much light into what I'm dealing with.
I love that you asked that. Yes. So inside of the program that I've built, it's all the things that I use. And one of the first things I do with clients is called the relationship inventory.
Okay.
And this is where we're looking at all of your past significant relationships. And there's a set of questions that I have people answer. One of those questions is, did you know that you were loved? And if so, how did you know? Another is, were you emotionally and physically safe? So we have them look at all their significant relationships, asking these questions like that. And then you get that 30,000 foot view of your relationship history, and you're able to put together the patterns and you can see what's really going on. And for me, there was something about having that clarity and seeing the roots that finally allowed me to get to self-compassion, because that's what we need, is self-compassion. So we're no longer judging ourselves. Once you see where did it come from, what are the patterns, then you can be compassionate and then you can fully let it go.
So here's something I've been wondering, because I feel like childhood trauma is kind of a newer concept that people are working on in therapy. And I would say most of my friends in therapy are working on some kind of childhood trauma. And have you seen these videos that are like, I'm a millennial, so I do this? I saw one the other day that was like, I'm a millennial. It's not my fault. It's my parents' fault. I think about this quite a bit. Like, I think it's a two-part question. One is, did all of our parents fuck up? And then two is like, is it inevitable that we are all going to work through some sort of childhood trauma?
I like to say this. I like to say our parents were doing the best that they could, and there are ways that they failed us. And they didn't fail us in all the ways, but there's ways that they did fail. And I have clients who come to me and they say, oh my gosh, I had this most amazing childhood and I actually didn't have any childhood trauma. And then we look at their inventory and it's like, oh yeah, you actually did, right? Like everyone has some form of childhood trauma. I will say this, sometimes it's not from your parents. It's not as significant from your parents. Maybe it was from a sibling. Maybe it was from a friendship group. There are women I work with where the root of their trauma was their childhood friendship groups. Of the rejection they experienced. So it's not always the parents, but there is something that happened to you in your childhood that is impacting you today. You cannot escape it, right? But then the ownership piece of, I think we have to say, we're all perfectly imperfect. Let's not blame our parents. Let's just acknowledge there's ways that they failed us. And also, how can we take ownership to decide, okay, what's serving me from my childhood? And then what do I need to let go of? What do I intentionally need to release?
I think it's the word trauma sometimes for me, because I feel like it feels like it should be like big T trauma.
Right.
And sometimes you like almost like undermine the trauma that you had because you're like, oh, it wasn't like I was abused or something big, right?
Yeah.
But I think what I'm learning from a lot of this work is it can be the small things that accumulate and builds up. So I love the idea of what you were saying about just taking inventory from all relationships and not just parents. Why do you think you took this approach outside of probably being in school for to be in therapy? But what else was like the reason that you were like, let me go inward? And why do you think that was so impactful for you?
Great question. I think I had spent the majority of my 20s doing the opposite of blaming the dating pool, blaming all the people that I was dating. And I had been in tons of toxic relationships, just none that were that
This
toxic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think what happened is, and I call this your common denominator moment, where I was just in so much pain that finally the light bulb went off of I am the common denominator, and I was finally willing to accept it because I was just in so much pain, and I just went, I just can't keep doing this. My hope is that people don't have to get to that point where you're in so much pain, that you can have that common denominator moment early on in your dating journey. But yeah, we have to take ownership. We control what we bring to our dating lives. We get to decide. And the beauty there is when I show up differently, I get different results.
It's great that you brought up the word control, because I think for many of us, we think being vulnerable means losing control. So how can we shift that mindset to know that we can be in control and be vulnerable at the same time?
I deal with this a lot when I'm working with clients, and it's really realizing that in order to be vulnerable, you have to develop emotional safety. So saying, I trust myself to be vulnerable. I trust myself that I can be emotionally safe no matter what I'm sharing, because that's what control is about, is keeping yourself safe. At some point, you learned, oh, I have to not be vulnerable, and then that's going to keep me safe. So let me try to control. But it's about realizing, oh, I'm safe, but I'm disconnected. I'm also not getting what I want. So how do I then build the emotional safety within myself to say, oh, I trust myself so much that it's great for me to be vulnerable. And I know that that's going to help me build connection. So I think it's that bigger vision and the why, right? Like getting clear on, hey, I know that there's a reason that I need to be vulnerable and open up.
I think control is such an interesting word in general, because there's one side of it, like we're just talking about, is taking control of your life. You're taking accountability, agency, having the bigger picture, all that. But then I think an area that I've struggled with, or maybe the most vulnerable piece, is like actually relinquishing control in some areas. Like as someone that identifies, well, I've become more secure, but I still have anxious tendencies that come through. And I think a big part of it was like dating, for instance. I really struggled with, waiting for that next text or next date. I felt out of control. Like I felt like I couldn't control the situation, and that was very anxiety driven. But I think getting vulnerable in that, and then also, even in relationships, you cannot control everything, and people will disappoint you even in the healthiest of relationships. And learning to accept that and getting vulnerable that way and giving a little more space has been, I guess, a lifelong challenge for me. How do you look at like this side of control?
Yeah. When you're in a long-term relationship and you're recovering from this, there's a lot of opportunities to practice.
Yes, there are.
Right?
Yes.
So I actually think one of the things that's so helpful is practicing just being in the moment. The let them. I think about Mel Robbins. She talks about like let them, right? Like releasing expectations. I always talk about how can we let go of expectations, but also have clarity on our standards. Expectations are I'm predicting something's going to go a certain way. Standards are I'm really clear on what my non-negotiables are and I know what my standards are. But if I let go of expectations in the moment and I learn to just be present, I'm going to have so much more joy and connection and so much more secure attachment being built between my partner and I.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners. When was the last time you checked the ingredients in your dishwasher pods? Spoiler alert, they're full of chemicals and microplastics that can stay on your dishes even after they're washed. And studies show that this residue ends up inside of you, causing inflammation and gut damage. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean you're used to. They offer refillable cleaning products with a beautiful cohesive design that looks great on your counter. From cleaning sprays to hand soap, toilet bowl cleaners, and laundry tablets, Blueland has you covered. And Blueland is trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. I use their dishwasher tablets for every load, and my dishes always come out sparkling clean. I love how compact the packaging is and how affordable they are. Refill tablets start at just $2.25, and you can get even more savings when you buy in bulk or through a subscription. Celebrate Earth Month and make the switch today. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/dateable. You won't want to miss this. blueland.com/dateable for 15% off. That's blueland.com/dateable to get 15% off. April is Earth Month. If there is one thing I've learned, it's that quality is sustainability. Think about it. When you invest in well-made, durable products, you're not just buying something that lasts longer. You're keeping waste out of landfills and reducing the need for constant replacements. That's exactly why I love Avocado Green Mattress. Avocado mattresses are crafted with the highest quality certified organic materials and expert craftsmanship. They're also climate neutral certified, meaning every purchase helps reduce carbon emissions and supports a healthier planet. Avocado mattresses offer easy financing options with Affirm, sleep trials up to 1 year, and generous warranties for your peace of mind. The best part is that you can try before you buy. You can visit one of their retail stores or premier retail partners to experience the comfort firsthand. Head to avocadomattress.com today and save up to 10% on certified organic mattresses. Dream of better for you and the planet.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
I think about this as like basically, it's like working out. It's working out for your mental fitness, and vulnerability is just like one of the exercises you can do. And I kind of think some people avoid vulnerability because they feel like then they would reveal their weaknesses. That's what it's related to. Or it's related to their failures. But we've seen, and we've written about this in our book too, is that it's those weaknesses and failures, if you want to call it that, that's what can deepen connections too, because that's what makes you multidimensional. What would be some advice you give to them to say it's okay to show, if you want to call it, the weaknesses that you have?
I have a story about this that I think will be helpful. My partner and I were long distance early on. I was in Montana and he was in Florida. So you can imagine, I mean, the farthest you could possibly be from someone. And we were getting along so well and the relationship's going great. And I would go visit him and I'd stay for maybe a week to 10 days. And it was early on, I think it was my 3rd trip, I was feeling some anxious attachment come up. It was the night before I was flying out the next day. And I feel the tears coming and there's no real words. And then in my head, I'm going, okay, I just need an article of his clothing. I just want to take something with me. Okay, so that I know that he's real and it's something that I can hold on to. And he's in the other room and I'm trying to do this before he notices. So I go and I grab a pair of his socks. Don't ask me why. It was available. I'm like grabbing a pair of his socks to take with me. He walks in on me as I'm about to put these socks in my suitcase. And he's like, what are you doing? And I just burst into tears in that moment. After, I was trying to play it cool, didn't want him to think that I was quote unquote needy. He's like, I just want you to know that I care about you and this is going so well. And I want to give you my favorite sweatshirt instead. I still have the sweatshirt. And to me, it's like, it's such this example of that vulnerability allowed us to deepen our relationship and it allowed him to know where I was at. It's a beautiful part of our story.
I love that story.
It's great.
I think like for me, I was for years in relationships, I would hold back. I wouldn't say my needs. I didn't even know my needs for a while, but I would never like say anything to rock the boat. And I think that looking back, it actually was creating a distance because one, I would get resentful if the needs weren't being met, but also I wasn't like being super honest in a way. It's not like I was like lying, but I wasn't like giving someone my full self and who I was and allowing them to meet me. And a big shift like in my current relationship is that I've always kind of been able to share and put it out there. And to me, that was a huge sign that it was very healthy. But I think for me, I've also struggled sometimes at those like inflection points of like getting more serious because the anxious side comes back and it's like, now I'm more invested and I have more to lose. And like I would start those cycles. And I think being able to share with my partner was, first of all, the reassurance was there and that helps significantly. Like, what else would you say to people that maybe are struggling with this, that they feel this like old way come through, even when there's no like reason for it per se, like in the relationship, it's just stuff that you haven't fully worked through?
I think what I would want people to think about is how can you slow down, pause, breathe in the moment, be aware that it's happening. You want to practice mindfulness, self-compassion. How would you speak to a dear, dear friend that was going through something like this? And then I like to have my clients do something called reality testing, right? We're checking in with what are the facts?
Yeah.
It's really helpful. We should all try it out where you just check in with what are the real facts of the relationship. And when you pause and do that, it's going to help you just get back to that secure place. And one thing that's helpful too, I call these secure tokens. So I have my clients come up with, maybe it's a pile of photos that the two of you have together of your best memories, or it's a love letter from your partner, whatever it is. But you want to have like physical things that can represent the secure attachment that you have in your relationship. It's helpful to use those in that moment.
I think both of you gave examples of the spectrum of what being vulnerable could mean. Like in your example, Dr. Morgan, you didn't want to miss him while he was gone, so you wanted a reminder of him. There's nothing emotionally deprived about that. It's like, I just want to have you around me, even when you're physically not here. Julie, in your examples, like, I want to be able to express my needs so my partner can meet me where I am.
Right.
And that just shows the whole gamut, because I think sometimes people think being vulnerable means like voicing something that's negative or voicing a critique or saying something about themselves that's like so horrendous or this like a big T trauma that they need to reveal.
Yeah.
Dr. Morgan, maybe you can give us kind of like more examples of what being vulnerable could mean, because I think people have a negative connotation attached to it.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. One of the key things that you mentioned here too was getting vulnerable about what you want. What do you want your life to look like? What kind of relationship do you want? Sometimes we're very scared to do that because we're afraid that our partner's not going to match up with what we want, right?
Yeah.
For example, after being with my partner in Florida, I moved down to Florida. He drives me across the country in a U-Haul with 2 dogs. This is the kind of guy he is, like packed the U-Haul for me, drove it across the country. We're there for a year. I end up hating Florida. This is not my place to be. So I tell him, I have to go back to Montana. Like, I love you. I want you to be happy. This was real growth for me. The old me would have stayed there and been miserable. I said to him, I love you. I want you to be happy. If your happiness is here in Florida, I totally get it. And I will be moving home to Montana. So that's an example of I was very vulnerable about what I wanted, what I needed. And then I allowed him to make the decision. It wasn't you have to move to Montana with me. It was very loving and it allowed him to be vulnerable. I wanted to know where he was really at.
Yep.
So I think we also have to invite our partners to be open and honest with us. But it's a great point that we can't create the kind of relationship we want unless we're open about what we want.
I love that. And like, even I'm just thinking of your example of like, that could be telling someone that you want another date, or like, you know, that's important, or that you want to define the relationship, or you want to get engaged, like all the different things. And you're not forcing someone, but even just putting it out there is being vulnerable instead of like suppressing it.
Or that you want to have children, or you want to really focus on your career, or you really want to focus on travel and you see yourself being a nomad, right? There's all these ways of living and we get to choose the kind of life we want. And we have to be vulnerable with our partners so that they have the opportunity to see, does this match up with my vision for my life as well?
I think the other side too is like asking for what you need from them. So sometimes, yes, it's this is what I need and seeing if they can move forward. But then like we hear people that are like, well, they never text me or they don't text enough. And it's like, can you share that with them? In my opinion, that's definitely being vulnerable to ask for what you need. I do think it's how you do it. Like I have a friend that I think uses a lot of therapy speak in conversation. Like she has a therapist. So, but she'll use like boundaries and like, it's like, but it sounds like clinical almost. And it's like what she's saying, this totally makes sense. But I think it might be the delivery maybe that's like off. What's your take of like, how do you balance like sharing your boundaries, making it more like a wall they have to climb over?
For me personally, even if I tried to sound clinical, I couldn't. Like I'm an emotional. Oh yeah. Like I'm connected to my emotions, but I will say there are a couple phrases and you guys have probably heard these, but the story I'm telling myself is, the narrative I have about this is, or I find myself thinking, XYZ. I felt blank when you did blank, acknowledging the emotions, how we felt because of someone's actions.
Yes.
Those are just game changers when you can start to incorporate those in your communication.
Well, I think that puts it more on how you're doing too and like where it's coming from opposed to like you're doing something wrong. Like if someone's like, my boundary is blah, 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 that feels like it's not a conversation or you're more just like, this is a statement where I think like when you're like the story I'm telling myself or whatever that is, you're saying the same thing. It's just the way it's being said.
Yeah.
I do think as women, especially, we see two extremes. I was just reading in an article that a lot of women, when they express their needs, they follow it up with an apology. Like, I'm sorry if that sounds needy. I'm sorry that sounds like too much. I'm sorry if you don't have time for that. So that's one extreme. And the other extreme is the therapy speak with the hard boundaries. But the middle ground is like coming from a place of connection. And this is what's going to get us closer as a partnership. And are you willing to do this? Like that feels more collaborative than any of those two extremes.
Absolutely. I love boundaries. I think we need boundaries. And I just think that sometimes we're not aware of that they really are flexible and they're like a living, breathing thing. It's not that you just say, this is my boundary and that's it, right? Like it's a conversation.
I think on the other side of it, there's obviously being vulnerable, but then taking in your partner's vulnerability. Like I remember we had this conversation with the men's coach, Connor Beaton, and he was saying that like a lot of women desire the vulnerable guy. But then when he actually gets vulnerable, it feels like a turnoff. What's your take of that dynamic? And then like, how do you invite someone's vulnerability and then also be there for them when they express it?
Oh, it's so funny you mentioned that. I was thinking about that during this conversation. What I've realized is if we are emotionally unavailable to ourselves, or we've had a lot of emotionally unavailable men in our life, when you have that partner that is then able to be vulnerable with you, and let's say it's a man who's, crying and they're breaking down, that experience can be just it can bring up so much, right? And it's not even about your partner. It can be about your own stuff. So I think if we are having that reaction, it's this invitation of, what do I need to look at internally? What do I need to heal? And it could be fears of, well, if they're not the strong person, who's going to take care of me? It could be your inner child being afraid of who's going to take care of me. But gosh, it's such a powerful thing. I've been able to hold my partner as he's sobbed. I don't know how he would feel if I'm saying this on your show, but
we applaud him.
Right? I mean, it's like, but I know that there was a younger version of me that would have just been like, oh my goodness, I can't deal with this. This is too much, right? So I think it really does take healing our own stuff and feeling emotionally resourced ourselves and supported and emotionally available for us to then really appreciate that in our partners.
That's such a great point. I break down when I see other people cry. I can't stand it. I have to turn away. Like it really affects me. Even strangers just crying really affects me. So that's a really interesting way of looking at this. Like, what is it going on inside me that's making me feel so triggered by this act of vulnerability?
What do you think it is, Yue?
I think I've just
Let's get vulnerable.
Let's get vulnerable. It's so funny. It's like I think about my childhood again. And in my family, you're taught not to cry. And if you cry, you're weak. I was the first grandchild in my extended family, and everybody thought I was going to be a boy. So when I was born, everybody treated me like a boy. And that actually gave me even more pressure to not cry. It was like, you're the first, you're the oldest grandchild, you shouldn't cry, you're strong. Even recently, talking to my dad, he told me that he got really vulnerable. He told me he's been feeling sad and wanting to cry recently because of aging. He's like, how did I wake up one day and I'm in my 70s? And then he said that he got mad at himself for feeling this urge to want to cry. And I was like, oh my God, that comes from your childhood. I was like, Dad, that's your childhood trauma. But I think that's when I definitely realized that how much pressure he puts on himself is almost that much pressure I put on myself for like not being that vulnerable. To me, that's just like too vulnerable.
That's such good insight. There's so much opportunity there for you to think about, okay, how do I change how I'm relating to myself about this? And kind of what does that internalized parent look like? This is where it all starts, is the awareness.
And you know what's so funny is Julie and I, for the longest time in our friendship, Julie's like, I'm a crier. I can cry all the time.
We're the opposites.
And I'm like, in my mind, I feel like that's so liberating to be able to cry freely. I don't do that. It's just like not a skill that I have. But we're so opposite in that. And I've always been like, that's so freeing. Like how liberating to be able to cry.
But then I've carried shame about it of like, I'm too much, too emotional, too many needs, all of that. So I think it's being vulnerable, though, is putting it out there and being like, this is
who I am.
Who I am and part of it. And what's the areas that obviously are such assets. And then what is this bringing up for me that's areas that I need to look inward.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think sometimes we have this idea that the more that we heal, the more like stable and we'll just... we won't cry as much. But what I have found is the opposite. You know, I'm in this super healthy, emotionally safe relationship. And I probably cry now more than I ever did just because I'm so connected to my emotions and it's safe for me to express my emotions. Like we'll be watching TV and this little commercial come on with like dogs or old people or something. And my partner will just look over at me and he knows like I'm crying. It's because I'm emotionally safe.
I get you because I do that all the time. I guess that's good to hear. I feel like for me, I'm always like, I'm almost like envious of the people that kind of pull it together more. But I think what you're saying is like, we all have these emotions. And by being vulnerable, you're not afraid to show it.
And then it's also like, how quick do you regulate back? I think when we're securely attached, we're emotionally safe. It's like, oh, I can feel it. But then I can just go back to my secure place like so much more easily.
I love that. And it brings me, I think, to my first takeaway is that I think we always think it's all about what am I telling other people or sharing, and that's what vulnerability means. And of course, like sharing is one part of it. But what I'm gathering from this conversation, that the even bigger part, or maybe the first step, being vulnerable with yourself and reconnecting to yourself. And I think that's something that's often missed in this vulnerability conversation. Like we hear of people that are just like, I'm going to share like an STI I had, or I'm going to share like, I know Yue went on a date once where the guy talked all about like his ex's abortion. And it's just like a first date, mind you.
No.
But like we think of like what we're going to say to bring someone closer, but understanding our own needs, our own desires, and not being afraid to share that when the time is right and the connection is there. I think that is the ultimate form of vulnerability. And I'm so glad that you shed light on that. And then my last takeaway is I feel like we've been told, especially as hetero women, like don't have needs, don't be needy. Like that's been something that's been so reinforced. But like, if you don't have needs, like everyone has needs, like you're just not sharing them at the point. And to what you were saying earlier of like the most vulnerable people are able to express and not just keeping it bottled up. Sharing your needs is actually like, it's essential in a relationship, because how would the person know how to like meet you and be there for you? And if you're going to develop like a partnership with someone, like they need that roadmap. They need to know what's going on for you. So it's reframing like what being needy versus having needs is, and sharing. I love all the tactical tips of just like, how do we share from the I statement, or what is this bringing up? For me, it's not necessarily something you're not doing, but how do I share how I feel so you can meet me?
Beautifully said. Yes, absolutely. I agree.
I'm just hearing that, it's like when we go on dates, we bring a representative of ourselves. And I think it's a good checkpoint to be like, okay, am I speaking as my representative or am I speaking as myself? And I think the vulnerability comes from speaking as yourself. A lot of the trauma dumping is from your representative who's like, oh, I really want to make this person feel like they're closer to us, right? So I'm going to represent you in this light. But would you authentically do that to bring someone closer? So I think there's always going to be situations where we don't want to be as vulnerable, or it's a little bit more difficult. And I think those are great opportunities to expand and push ourselves and say, what does vulnerability even mean to me at this point? And can it bring me closer to this person? Because ultimately, that is the entry to a deeper connection. And we can't forget that. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Morgan, if you were to leave our listeners with one takeaway from this episode, what would it be?
I think it would be, you get to decide what your relationship is like, that your past relationships do not determine your present or future relationships. You can be really intentional about how do you want to show up? What kind of partner do you want to attract? And it's never too late for you. I don't want anybody listening to this episode thinking, oh, well, it's possible for them, but not for me. It's really never too late for you to rewire your brain and start showing up differently.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for this whole conversation. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yes. So my podcast, Let's Get Vulnerable, and we have an incredible episode from you two on there as well, but it's available anywhere podcasts are aired. And then I'm on Instagram at Dr. Morgan Coaching, Dr. Morgan Coaching.
Awesome.
Fabulous. Thanks so much again, Dr. Morgan. We're going to wrap up this episode. Stay dateable.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.